And here it go.
All right, well, let's get this thing started. So the meeting of May 19th, 2021, our first agenda item is to read the minutes from the last meeting, which have been provided prior to the meeting. I think we just start with if there's any discussion or questions about those meeting minutes. And if not, let's go ahead and, do we need a motion to approve? I have a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes.
So moved. This is John.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Whitney. I second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so Dave, you want to jump into the appointment of new members?
Yes. On page 18 of the agenda, I forgot to update the page numbers when I sent out the revised packet. But you have 3 applications. I only heard from one person from last year's group that did not, that submitted, and they declined. They already had other commitments. So we have 3 people to choose from for next year. And you have Angela Doctor. She works for Alliant Energy. She's a lead SOC advisor, which I'm not sure what that means, but so you can kind of see her information. She has accounting management, bachelor's degree, and an MBA, 17 years in accounting and auditing within Alliant, I believe. Then you have Melanie Brown. She's with Transamerica. She's a vendor liaison. She has a lot of experience with data analysis. And then you have Stephanie Overby, and she is a writer and has her MBA. She's a self-employed, and you can kind of, she's going to be starting her MBA program at University of Iowa, and has some backgrounds that feels like she would be a good addition to our committee. So I'm going to let you guys kind of ask any questions right now before we take a vote. All of you should have, in my email I sent out with the revised agenda, there was a link in that email. If you click on that link, you'll be able to rank the order because we have the terms is usually 3 years, and we have Gordon was just renewed for 3 years last year, and so he and then Drew has fulfilled his 3-year commitment. So if the person with the highest rank, I would say, goes and fills Drew's, the person with the second highest rank will then fill the remaining 2 years for Gordon, and then we'll kind of go from there. And so does everybody understand how we would go about that? Have any questions?
Yeah, Dave, how much do we discuss the applicants in this meeting?
You guys can discuss and just as what you feel comfortable with discussing, and just saying, looking at their skills and abilities, and then I don't know if people know these people or whatnot, and or if to the comfort level that everybody has to discuss it. I guess I should put it at that.
Well, I think Angela Doctor, the lead SOX advisor, I'm sure John can jump in here, but that's Sarbanes-Oxley. So she's definitely been living in that audit world more than some of the rest of us probably have.
And I can say I do know Angie. She's been on other boards with me. So this is Janet, and she's done, she's fulfilled her commitments there.
Thank you, Janet.
Does anybody know Melanie or Stephanie? I think that is no. I think what's interesting with these 2 candidates is they're not necessarily the accounting auditor types that we have on our board. So it maybe gives us an opportunity to branch out and get some different skills on the committee. So I think it's potentially a very good thing.
Chad, have you ever run into Melanie before?
I haven't. I know what group she would be working in, but I don't know her personally. I know who she reports up through, but I haven't run across her. Of the three, though, I guess to your point, Scott, I would think Melanie would bring in a different perspective. She on the group that she's in, she would be, I think, working with our. Let me see if I check my facts here. Yeah, a lot of our third parties, obviously, and our really big third parties, and helping to risk assess those, which I think could be relevant experience.
Thanks, Chad. And I think Stephanie, doesn't she have some insurance background, some accounting background? I don't know how deep either of those are. But she's got some property and medical insurance background that might help us, since we don't have that necessarily super deep on our committee at this point. Well, Dave, maybe absent more discussion, do we just do our vote and submit?
That's what I would do. If you don't have any more questions or discussion, then I would just recommend that you guys go out and vote, and then Sarah will tally with all of the recommendations and it'll let us know.
Okay.
So, are you looking for the vote right now? Okay.
Yes.
Sarah, nice job with that. I submitted mine and it worked very smoothly.
A little different than the old put the paper in a hat thing, right?
For sure.
Okay. So Dave, are we ready to move on to our annual review of
So
performance?
I think we'll wait until Sarah gets there, and then we'll come back and do a vote on official. So.
Okay.
Mine submitted, Sarah.
Yep, I'm submitted.
I'm only seeing 7 right now. Would that be all? Oh, there's one. Okay. Okay, it looks like the results are Angela was number 1 and Stephanie was number 2.
Okay, so with that, I would recommend that we would have a vote to appoint Angela, Dr. and Stephanie Overby. Angela would fulfill the term of being vacated by Drew, and then Stephanie would take over for the remaining 2 years for Gordon. I will reach out to them either today or probably tomorrow, and to let them know, and then we'll at some point in time I'll have a meeting, an orientation meeting, just kind of to review some stuff with them, and before we meet in September. So do we gonna have a motion?
This is Janet. I'll make a motion.
Second, John.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Okay. We're ready to roll, Dave.
Great. I'm going to share my screen. I think that works best. So I can, and we're going to go to, let me get this down. Can everybody see the agenda? Is that yes?
Yes, we can
Okay.
see it, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go down to item number 2 then. We're going to be talking about the charter. Thank you for everybody completing that. It's always kind of tricky because, this is a survey that is, we don't know who answered what. And so when I requested, is it complete? There were some people who had started and not didn't quite finish, whatnot. And so I apologize for the emails of saying, hey, please complete this so that we can compile it. But here's the results here. And so we'll kind of go down the line here. We had for question number 1, the audit committee has a positive working relationship with management. We had 8 people responded with a 5, and then 4 people responded with a 1. So, and a gross of an average of 4.89. And I mean, I guess I'm going to kind of go down to, because I don't think we necessarily need to read every one of these, but everybody can kind of see where we're sitting here. We do have some with 3s, which is, if you go down here, 3, no basis for judgment. And so we had in like differences of opinion on issues that are satisfactorily resolved to the satisfaction of the committee. We had a couple of, 3s, no basis for judgment. And all audit committee members provide input, same thing. And the charter is used to document, and we had majority of people on 4s and 5s. We had 1 no basis of judgment. I'm not sure who that person is. But based on the numbers, it appears to me with the count that Gordon did respond to this, because we have 9 responses, but not everybody had to necessarily respond on every question. So here's one, question number 4, only 8 of the 9 people had responded, and you get further down, you'll have the same thing. We had 8 people responded on some of these, so not everybody responded. But I grabbed what we did have. Let me see here. Committee members encourage a tone at the top that conveys the basic values of ethical integrity as well as legal compliance and strong financial reporting control for number 12. We did have another one that was no basis, but I think when we have majority of the people that are in the 4s and 5s, it's pretty good. Here's one that we have. The scope of the audit committee as outlined by the charter meets the committee's expectations. And so we did have a 1 within that and had a comment associated with that. And I believe this is also kind of a continuation from a little bit of conversation we had at our last meeting. And so, so I'm just going to read this comment. This is I believe the committee should understand what it has been done by the district to control risks that are much greater than the financial statements. Internal controls goes well beyond those specific to the financial statements. If the purpose of the committee is limited strictly to work currently done by the independent auditor, meeting monthly is unnecessary, and we aren't talking about the highest risk. For example, who is testing the internal controls around the district's employment practices, or who is testing district controls around incident management, physical security, and etc. Inherently, these have been among the highest risk to the district. How are they being controlled? Who's auditing them? Why would the results of those audits not roll up to an audit committee? I only mentioned 2 risks that are top of mind to me. what sort of risk assessment is being done by the district to inherently score all the applicable risks and determine more comprehensive audit plan. As it stands, I don't believe that district actually has an audit plan. And so I think we did talk about that a little bit last meeting about, do we want to change, amend our charter to accommodate additional things that has not been in the past included. And I think that will be, a big part of our discussion in September when we meet to review our plan. But I do think this is something that has been brought to light. We talked a little bit briefly about it last meeting, but I think it's worth some additional conversation as a group. And I think it is something that when we do the report out to the board here next month, that we do share that we would like to have a conversation, like to have a consideration about how of changing the charter a little bit to incorporate some of these things, to be have a greater look overview of that. And we might have to contract with people to help us do some of this internal control audits of some of these issues. And because I know we have a safety committee and a security committee that might roll into this a little bit, this discussion, and maybe we can bring them to the table and have discussions about what we're doing to mitigate risk with regards to safety and those types of things. And we can roll them into the committee to have conversations about that. And so that we kind of pull two separate committees that are already existing and move them together for this type of conversation at different times in the year. We can kind of do that. But I think that is something that we need to look into more as we move forward. Does anybody have any comments they would like to make about this question?
Dave, I agree. I was kind of going down that same road when we're reporting to the board next month. Is that when that is, or July?
Yeah.
We've traditionally said, well, we'd like to hire an internal auditor, and that's been on the docket for several years. I think I'm kind of in the middle on this, because I think absolutely this committee needs to know the overall audit plan or the overall risk assessment that the district is doing. So I think that that's definitely a recommendation. I don't know that it necessarily rolls up to this committee, but I think this committee needs to know that somebody is reviewing these things, that there's somebody with that oversight responsibility.
I agree. We meet with the the tech group. And they give us kind of an overview. The safety committee might be another one that, if you're already a working committee working on these things, to just report up, because I do think, to reevaluate what the scope is of this committee and what our role is in this. How into the weeds do we need to get? But to have the background knowledge of what's happening at the district level would be valuable.
This is Chad. I'll just say I have to own that comment. That's my comment. I think maybe everybody knows that from my comment in the last meeting. But I would say we probably want to discuss this one further later when we start talking about the charter itself. But I wouldn't envision like this particular committee getting into the weeds per se. More so, who's the team that's actually auditing these other parts of the district, right? It would be cyber and physical security and all these other things. I guess in my personal experience at Transamerica and my current role, all that stuff sort of rolls up under me, and then I report to the audit committee. And the only things the audit committee really discusses are those that where there's significant deficiencies that exist, and how are those being remediated, et cetera. So for me, it's just more of a curiosity, right? What's the actual risk assessment that's being done by the district to make sure that we all know where those things are being audited, and if there are deficiencies, who knows about them and is making sure they're being remediated. And when I read audit committee and I think about the internal control environment, I feel like, okay, there's some responsibility there. But I'll leave it alone at that, so we don't. I think you could probably talk about this particular topic for a full hour in and of itself.
Yeah, Chad, I appreciate that, and it sounds like at least a few of us are pretty much on the same page. I think it's more we need some visibility into this. We don't know that we, I think I have a comment later. I don't know that I know enough about IT to necessarily discharge my duties, that the IT control environment is adequate, but we need to know that somebody is reviewing that. And maybe there's, if we're talking about physical security employment practices, maybe it's just more visibility, excuse me, that we know that there is a committee in charge of that and that we get some visibility into what they're doing.
All right. Any other discussion on this question and topic, comment?
Yeah, I would just echo everything that's been said. I mean, I think this committee is definitely a big asset in terms of just his role and where he's at in a very large global corporation. So I think there's a lot of insight to be gleaned from that.
Yeah, I agree. That's why it's great to have a lot of different people from a lot of different work professions within, our committee. You get a lot of different insight that you might not have previously. And so I think, as you can tell, most of our oversight has been on the financial side of things in the past, and with those throwing in their computer risk and those types of things, but not to the level of, physical security. That's one of the things that we haven't even touched on, but we did talk about cyber a little bit. We had a little bit more in-depth conversation this year. We've had in years past about that type of stuff. And I think we are going down the road to do some more testing, some more things on our IT side. But I'm sure there's probably a lot of other things that we could probably be doing, have a conversation of what we're doing and results of them. Do we have some issues that we're, from those testings that we're doing that is, we need to beef things up even more than what we're doing. So I think that is, part of our IT looking at things, and Craig Barnon and his team will come in and talk about what they have done and what, when they've done some of these testing using third parties to help through that process, and a report of what they found, any recommendations they had to share with the committee and what we are going to do. Those are things that we can talk about that's already within our charter, and we can kind of beef up a little bit more in the conversation. But we can have a conversation in September to talk about other areas that we feel is necessary to include in our charter. And but I think it's good for us to include that in the PowerPoint report out to the board that we are looking at doing that, and then I can address that in a slide that I can share with the group next week, but our next meeting, which is a very quick turnaround for the board meeting, because we meet Wednesday. That's the same day board packet information is due for the following Monday for the board meeting. So short turnaround. All right. Enough on that topic, on that question there. So we'll kind of go on down through. Committee understands organizational structure and activities. We had two people that basically said, no basis for judgment. And we do have a comment number 15, but the question is, the committee evaluates whether management exhibits the proper tone at the top that fosters a culture and environment of high quality financial reporting, appropriate attention to internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. And and this is really, in my mind too, is all financial internal controls. This has nothing to do with any other controls of school security of facilities itself, but those types of things. So the comment is, while the virtual meetings have limited executive sessions to emails, if members choose, the executive sessions during an in-person meeting were more robust. To be fair, it might be the composition of the committee and the general approval of the school staff's actions. So that's the only comment that was made on this one.
I do agree, and I think that would also play into some of the comments or the responses that we saw above, with the level of engagement, and is the committee engaged in asking appropriate questions and those kinds of things. The virtual meetings have been great, a great stand-in, but those in-person meetings were certainly more dynamic, I believe, in the conversations that were had.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really much harder and virtually, and I think it's hard to get people's level of engagement during these meetings as well. I think it is more productive when we are in person, and hopefully, you know, we are opening up our facilities June 7th. So we might be able to meet in person at our next meeting. So that would be a first all year. I'm going to kind of float that at the flagpole, so we might be able to meet in person. But and whether or not we're going to require masks would be the thing that we might still require masks if we do meet in person. But our facilities will be opened up as of June 7th to the public. So that's a good sign that we're heading in the right direction. Hopefully we can all meet in person at that meeting. So. And at that meeting, we'll also have a report out from the auditors on our spring AUP for Student Activity Fund reports. So we'll have that at our next meeting as well. So that'd be great to have that in person. I'm going to go down to number 18. We do have a comment under 18. Committee is aware of reports or other communications received from regulators and updates from the General Counsel on legal and regulatory matters that may have a material effect on financial activities and related financial statements, or that may affect a related organizational compliance policies. And this is the comment. I assume is correct, although there may be situations that the board and staff may, based on legal advice, does not share information immediately. To me, I consider this reasonable. And I think we had some conversations. I don't think it was this year, but it was in previous years about if information sometimes comes out after the fact that it was still in litigation or still in negotiations, that we may have not brought anything forward to the committee because it was still to the point of that's not something that we felt like it was a level that we could report out to committee yet. And sometimes before our next meetings, things come out, and then we've had a conversation before. Oh, yeah, this came out. Yeah, this we knew it was in the works, but we could not share anything at that point in time. So. Sometimes I'm not necessarily in the know until a settlement has been reached either. And at times like, oh, I didn't know that was an issue. Well, okay. So a lot of times it's the superintendent that has initial conversations with our attorneys for a lot of opening pending matters. Number 19. Do we have any comments on number 18 before I move to 19? Okay. The committee, under 19, the committee has discussions with the Chief Information Officer to understand organizational technology strategy, information system, and measures taken to protect technology resources, including disaster recovery and emergency preparedness. And comment 1 is see earlier comment, which I'm assuming is Chad's comment that he referred to earlier. And then number 2 is I feel our committee needs to have broad understanding of risk, but any deep level dive should be handled by other committees. And I think that was shared earlier in the discussion as well. So, any comments on that? Number 20 is the same comment, see earlier comment. The committee's review of all significant control deficiencies identified by independent auditors, as well as management corrective plans and a timetable to address those recommendations. That was for the most part, we have a smattering ones. For the most part, we have fours and fives and a few, no basis for judgment. And these rest of these comments, I was addressed kind of new questions. We added, we broke out these 2 questions. The committee reviews management's responses to the Student Activity Fund agreed upon procedures separate from our audit recommendations response. And so those are broken out separately so we could address those separately. And both of them are equal. We had 4 and 4. And what was the other new one, which I don't show up on my printout? I had it on another one. 1 second here. I'll pull that up. that's the wrong one. Item number 13 and item 32. Okay, 33 on 13. So I'm gonna go back to item 13. Well, I just have it right here. Item 13. That was a new question. The scope of audit. That's the one that we did add, which we didn't have anything about the scope of the audit committee. We already talked about that. And that's new, and revise these to, we revised number 32. The minutes of the meeting were taken and circulated prior to the next board meeting for review. And we kind of reworded that one. And the committee's review and management responses to audit recommendations. We clarified that as audit, annual audit versus the agreed upon procedures. So those were only changes from the questions and previously. So overall, we scored a 4.36 overall in comparison to our other years. So we're down a little bit, in comparison to the last few years, because I think those number ones have pointed out some things that we may want to improve and have conversations about. And that's, I think, what drove our scores down was those. But overall, I think it was a fair assessment, considering the things that were brought out this year and considering our year that we've had in the virtual mode. So that's all I have for that topic. Does anybody have any reflection or anything want to share?
No, I would echo your comments, Dave. I think part of this is just the year that we've had been in a virtual environment. It's not so easy for people just to jump in and share their thoughts when 3 other people might be trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So that some of that's just inherent. And I think that there's maybe, we brought up some, whether this is our committee's responsibility or not, at least there's maybe some risk that we'd like some visibility into.
Well, too, and I think in this format, too, this is a live meeting, which also is interesting that, when all of our meetings are open, to the public and open meetings, but this is being aired over YouTube and all that, that also has everybody, the guards up a little bit more than it would have maybe otherwise. Feel free to comment. So, all right. So that is item number 2 on the agenda. So these are item number 3 is committee highlights. This is kind of what we use as a driving force piece to help develop our report back to the board on an annual basis. And these are some of these items that Maureen shared with me, and I've added a few and kind of elaborated on some of the ideas that she threw out there. I do have a correction to make on one of them, but I will, once we go down through this, I'll kind of share that with you. So this year, we've added 3 new members. We had Jason, Janet, and Chad. We're all new members to our committee. We did have a more in-depth conversation regarding at-risk assessment and testing with our Craig Barnum, our Chief Information Officer or IT guy, whatever you want to call him. We did have some of that this year. We changed the format of our orientation meeting. We used the budget information on our website versus a PowerPoint that we had developed in the years past to kind of go over school finances. It kind of gave us to have the real data there. I think I would, we'll focus. I learned some things from the first time because I probably spent a little bit too much time on certain screens. I think I can kind of be a little bit more efficient in doing that in the future, but it was the first go around and kind of lost track of time. But I think that worked out okay, and I'm going to probably get an attempt again next year that way, if everybody's okay with that. We did have a cancellation of our meeting, kind of a last minute cancellation. We had an illness within the communications department. And so we moved everything to our December's agenda for the most part. We moved student activity fund away from KEV to our Grantwood finance software. And this gave us more oversight of the student activity fund. Before it was in a separate system, and we get reports on a monthly basis, and then we rolled it totally in our finance software at the end of the year with one journal entry that got reported off to the state. This gives us a lot more oversight on a month-to-month basis. We're seeing requisitions come to the system daily for approval, and this so that's what led to our changing up our agreed upon procedures this year. We paused the fall agreed upon procedures review by RSM for student activity fund. This is due to the impacts of COVID and the August ratio and the changeover in the accounting system from Kev to Grant Wood. A lot of our buildings, especially at some of our high schools, were not in our buildings, especially at Kennedy, for quite some time. And so if we would, we knew we had money in buildings that we weren't able to get into to get deposited. So we would have until we much later. So we would have failed on getting those deposited timely because of that. But as soon as we got in there, we got it okay to let people back in and start doing stuff, and we got that money deposited right away at that point in time. So there were things that we didn't necessarily follow current protocol based on the derecho impact. The spring agreed upon procedure for student activity fund was review was modified due to the shift from accounting from Kev to Grant Wood. The annual report of the districts for the FY 1920 audit was delayed due to the release of the federal guidance for the CARES Act and ESSER 1 expenditures. We had to wait until they got all their audit routines and things that needed, the guidance that needed to be able to complete our audit until that came through, and that was pushed everything off for like another month. Now we do have some, this is one I need to change a little bit. We were informed that we were going to have previously a new in charge on our FY 2021 audit. Danny Giffels was our in charge for the 1920 audit. Tebba Lawrence was going to be our in charge for the 2021 audit. Jordan Ballet was the audit manager assigned to our district for the last couple of years, and he's taken a new position. So we had not been informed as a replacement, but we have now. We've also, things are shifted a little bit. Tebba Lawrence is now going to be our audit manager for the audit coming up. And then Paul Yokas will be the in charge, which he's new. We have not had him in the past, but Tebba was on our audit last year, and she's been promoted to the audit manager to replace Jordan Valley. So I will update this to reflect that. So that's before we pull everything off for our next meeting. So, and then we did not receive any complaints from the tip line this year. Other than that, those are the highlights that I came off the top of my head, and with the assistance of Maureen. I don't know if there's any other highlights that people think is worth noting, or do we want to talk about maybe expansion of our charter as a topic that we want to consider doing that as a highlight, or
I'm thinking about that for a minute, Dave. Maybe one of the line items just needs to be that we plan to review the charter, and then maybe there's a couple of subsets. One of those is trying to get an overall assessment or an overall picture of the school district's risk assessment. And maybe the second piece is that we're going to consider that agreed upon procedures being either an annual engagement and maybe even a not necessary engagement. And I don't know that we necessarily decided that, but it was something that we discussed.
yeah. I can add that. Well, actuality, now I'm thinking about this TIPL hotline. I think we had something, but it was the tip was they saw somebody, an employee who was a salary employee out there in the day meeting with some other people that felt like that was during his normal work hours. And that was, now I think about that. And I think I did share that, but it wasn't a financial thing. It was this person, they don't know what this person does 24/7. This person could have taken a leave time during that piece of time. This person could have worked later because he had a meeting with somebody, personal meeting with somebody that he took care of. But that was brought to our attention through that. And I forwarded on to HR, and HR took it from there, and I didn't hear anything else about it. So, but no financial other than somebody saw somebody during the day and questioned whether or not he should be meeting with those people during that time. So I think that was the only tip line. I think that was this year. I might get confused that with the previous year, but these last 2 years have been kind of like all meshed together in my mind. So.
Yeah. Dave, on number 9, should we say anything? Because Chris is still the, would it be the director or the partner on the engagement?
Yes, and I'm not sure what the official, I'll have that on here. He's the,
I don't know if we want to just add that, there is continuity type of a thing of somebody who's familiar.
senior manager. So, yeah. I'll say something. The senior manager still, Chris Korcher would be assigned to our audit, you know.
And I'd agree too with the earlier discussion of adding kind of what Scott had mentioned. I think that'd be worthwhile to note that.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind? All right, hearing none, we'll kind of move on from this one. So next, especially for the new folks, we're going on to kind of the report model that we have done with the board. We give them 2 things. We give them a quick written report that goes to the board in the board packet. It's a summary of, we used to give them a whole lot of information. We used to give them the whole charter. We used to give them all kinds of stuff. And we narrowed it because we're not sure the board was going to read the whole charter anyway and all of that. So we narrowed this down to basically it was 3 pages. So we had talked about the audit committee in the background. The audit committee was created in 1997. We talked about the role of the audit committee. We talked about its membership. We talked about the responsibilities, and then we kind of go to, we added links. If the board wanted to go find the charter, they could click on the link and get to it from the agenda if they wanted to. We have the self-assessment. We are not, in the years past, we used to give it to them, but we just say we will give it to them if they request it. The meeting minutes as well, it's a link to that. And then we'll include the highlights and these committees' ongoing activities. These are kind of a lot of the things that are on our charter, we just kind of list them as things that the other things that we also look on an annual basis. And that's what this will be as well. We'll just continue that up and put that on there. That's that format for the board. Is everybody okay with continuing that format? I don't see a need to include the whole charters and all that stuff, just kind of a more narrow focus of what we're providing them.
So Dave, remind me, we give this to them and then we also do a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep, that's the next thing. Here's the PowerPoints that we go. So they have this in the board packet, and then we also do the PowerPoint in the meeting. So, and one of the things that we'll probably have to figure out, which we can determine at our next meeting, who are going to be the presenters of this. So we can have that at our next meeting. But keep that in mind. It's very painless. Whitney, you've been kind of part of that in the past, and typically, I think in the past you have just been there. Gary pretty much did all the talking, pretty much.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so I'm guessing Maureen will probably take that role on this year, but so we can talk about the next meeting. So this is structured as the annual activities. We kind of narrowed that down a little bit on this slide. And then we talked about the activities unique to this year, which would have been our highlights of this year, and that's what we kind of showed. And our new members will probably kind of look at that the same way. And then we'll have a recognize both Drew and Gordon for the years of service on the committee. And then we talked about the senior manager changes on that, and we'll just kind of pick and choose some of the highlights, and we'll have that ready, and we'll also include a slide talking about what we're going to do with evaluating the charter for next year as well. So, and then the question slide. So I'll have that all ready for us, for the committee, and then we can make changes on the fly. And when we meet in person, if we need to make some modification, we'll just make modifications to the PowerPoint. Because right after the meeting, I'll have to send that over for the board meeting. Any questions? As the slide says.
No, good timing, Dave.
All right.
Okay. So are we on to appointing the committee chairperson?
Yes.
And chairperson?
Yep.
So I think we briefly touched on this last month, and I think Maureen potentially agreed to be chairperson for another year. I agreed to be pro temp for another year, but I think that that's open for discussion if anybody else wanted to step into that role or either of those roles.
Or Scott, or do you have any desire to be the chairperson? I think that's as well.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with Maureen running the show for a year.
Yeah, I don't have any further discussion on my end. You guys have been doing a great job.
Dave, is this something that we're looking to approve and finalize?
Yeah, I would just recommend a vote then as proposed.
Well, I'll move it.
This is Whitney, I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Okay, so Dave, it doesn't look like we have any complaints to
Nope.
discuss. We're on to
Not.
recording.
Yeah.
All right.
Here's our. I'm trying to move this thing. You guys see it? Oh, there we go. There we go. That's better. This is the local revenues report. A lot of this stuff hasn't really changed. A lot of the discrepancies is COVID related. We've kind of gotten through this month to month. And so basically everything is pretty much status quo. Interest revenue is way down compared to last year due to market. And then we do have last year we had a lot more investment income in our safe funds because the market was a lot better with our bonds. And then we're spending some down money as well this year as well. And there's nothing else that is really jumping out of, the Pepple miscellaneous were up 70 percent more than we were a year ago. Well, a lot more than that. We're up quite a bit compared to a year ago. This year we're at 228,000 compared to 13,000 last year, and that's the rate of reimbursement for insurance damages that we had incurred internally, that we expend internally. Most of the damage was being picked up by our insurance company directly with the restoration company. So, any questions on the local revenues? Next year, this will be really nice. We'll actually have prior year information showing for activity fund. This year, we only just have the current year, so that will be much better. Broken out into the areas, so that'll be much better year-to-date numbers than we have. We just have a total number for last year. Here's our all of our revenues expenses by fund, just for your reference. So I won't kind of go into that. I just want to so you guys have a copy of that. We're general fund, we're at a surplus of 26 million for expenditures, and that's typical. As we're getting toward this year, our revenues exceed our expenditures because of taxes coming in and state aid. Then July, August, our expenditures for those months will exceed revenues because we don't take in state aid or property taxes most of the months. And that's why you have the expenditures jumping up from May to June. These are all the accrual months. They get pulled into June. That's why all of a sudden it jumps way above. So right now we're running a deficit in our student activity fund of $48,000. Actually, that's better than it has been. So we've been able to gradually increase people for attendance. Our basketball, we've been able to have a little bit more people attend, and we did so that's really helped because I think we were over 100,000 before. And then we do have an ability to, as long as the board approves, to help the student activity funds with some general fund dollars upon a board approval to help them because of the lack of revenues they're collecting due to the COVID restraints that we put on the number of people being in attendance and whatnot. So they just passed that within the last couple of weeks at the legislature. So that's good news that we'll be able to help support the activity funds. So they won't end up they won't end up overall in negative, but some of the sports could use some additional revenue because of, football gates were way down, basketball were down, and so that will provide some additional support. Our sales tax is running expenditures over revenue because of we're spending bond proceeds that we brought in for the construction of the new elementary school, or both two elementary schools now. And we just sold some bonds, a second round of bonds for Jackson this month. So we closed May 12th. So we'll actually, in the May, we'll actually have some increase of revenue coming in about almost $7 million in bond proceeds for Jackson. Nutrition fund is running a deficit this year. So we had a beginning fund balance, 1.8, now $1 million. One of the good things is the feds have extended the free lunches for next year, and the contribution rates in which they're providing is higher than what they normally would have. They're going to continue that on next year. So I'm very confident with schools being back in session, this deficit will be made up by next year with kids all back in school, and then we'll be able to recover these losses from this last year to this year. I think we'll make that up this next year, or if not all of it, majority of it, I think. Other funds, this will drop when we compare last year to this year. These Fund 60, that actually will just be our 5-season daycare will only show up in there. We only now it had Rockwell and or Collins Aerospace daycare and 5-season. Next year will just be totally 5 seasons. Our unspent balance right now, we have at this point in time, we're projecting at 34 days in the reserves and our unspent balance. We had last year we closed an unspent fund balance at 18 million. We're projecting that to go up to about 21. Part of that is due to ESSER funds that we're reimbursing ourselves, which will actually increase our unspent balance for a little bit. But I do that will over the next couple of years drop. We're projecting that to drop some, but right now it is projecting to go up, partially due to the impacts of ESSER in the mix. Those are the financial reports. Does anybody have any questions?
Dave, you might have already mentioned this, and sorry if you did, but how is funding that you got, that kind of COVID-related funding, impacted this year? I'm guessing it's been a pretty big net benefit, but
no, not necessarily. We ESSER, we already have ESSER 1 spent, and that's just a little bit over $3 million. Those dollars are all spent. A lot of that, a good chunk of that was deferring some of the one-to-one costs of the computers for our elementary kids. And we're still going to spend some of our ESSER 2 dollars to complete. About 2.9 million is technology related of all of the ESSER money for the elementary, and that's going to be coming out. But this year we're, we have incurred some FFCRA leave. We're going to be able to recoup our general fund dollars that we allocated. That's really for FFCRA leave. We're going to be able to recoup that against ESSER, which is about, I don't know, it's going to be $700,000 to $800,000 in that ballpark. And so actuality this year, we're going to reimburse us for expenditures that we did have, which will thus increase our fund balance. And we knew that was going to happen because we have the ability to reimburse ourselves for other expenses. For example, we hired a lot of bus attendants, trying to have all our buses filled with bus attendants due to COVID. Well, were we able to hit that mark? All buses had them? No, we weren't. But we're going to reimburse ourselves for some additional expenses from ESSER funds because that's what we were trying to do. And so that is helping us. And plus, we are continuing to pay for PPE, out of these funds. So now, but moving forward, our big push now is loss of learning losses, recovery of learning loss. And so we're working diligently, trying to get programming set up for the summer to expand, and then looking for what we can do in the next year. And because of ESSER 2 money is 14.4 million. ESSER 3 is 32.4 million. So we have a lot of funds coming to us, and but we're also looking at HVAC improvements that we can do to help air quality. So we're looking at the technology called bipolar ionization, which will retrofit to all of our HVAC units in our buildings that will clean the air of mold and viruses and those types of things that will help capture all of that, encapsulate and capture it in our filters. So that way our air quality is much better. And we could potentially be having other improvements we might be able to do with those funds. But our number one focus now is returning recovery losses students learning. That's what we're trying to figure out and how we're going to accomplish that. But we also know we have to have all this money spent. It's on a reimbursement basis now, so we don't get the money until we spend it. So it's you have to cash flow some of these expenses, and thankfully we do have the cash ability within Save and Pepple to be able to cash flow those HVAC upgrades until we get reimbursed. So that's the good thing on that. But it's not like ESSER 1. They gave us the money up front, which they weren't supposed to, but they did. And but ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 is all on a reimbursement basis. But it's not, it was like a net. So we are actually making some positive impacts to our bottom line this year, knowing with some of the reimbursement stuff that we were doing. Moving forward, majority of the expenditures are going to be expenses for things that we had incurred additionally. And but one of the things that what this will do, if you think about one of the financial indicators that schools use is the solvency ratio. Okay, the solvency ratio is your unrestricted fund balance divided by total revenues less AEA flow through dollars. Okay, so if you think about what the piece that's not there is expenditures. You don't see anything in the calculation for expenses. So if your revenue goes up through ESSER, because it will for these next 2 years, it is going to drive down our solvency ratio. Okay, because we have more revenue coming in, so thrown into the equation, so it will drive down our solvency ratio a bit. And so arbitrarily, just because of that's how the formula works. When you have all this additional revenue coming in and it's going to be treated as miscellaneous revenue, yeah, we have expenses, but because that revenue, and you wash, and those expenses wash, your fund balance stays the same, but you have a bigger revenue number in your denominator, which then will reduce your solvency ratio. So that's something that we're being mindful as well, because we want to make sure that it is above 10%, and we are going to be above 12 probably when we close this year, but we need to make sure that we try to maintain that going forward. And if it does drop, hopefully that we can explain that to the, if we have to issue more bonds or whatever, we can explain that to the bonding companies why that number dropped. It's partially because of the ESSER dollars rolling in to our general fund.
Thanks. Appreciate all the additional color there, Dave. It's helpful.
Yeah. Any other questions? I think that is all I have.
We did pretty well. This meeting was supposed to go until about 2 o'clock. If you're
Yes.
We kind of knocked it out today.
Yes, we did.
If there's nothing else, guys, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Whitney.
And a second?
This
Second.
is Janet.
We'll give that one to Janet. John got a couple earlier.
All right.
Spread the love.
All right. So we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.